The CNN studio was unusually tense that night. Even for a network accustomed to heated exchanges, this one felt different, almost historical. The producers knew it. The camera crew sensed it. And so did the two people about to face each other under the blinding studio lights. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat poised in her chair, a deep maroon suit pressed to perfection, her expression unreadable. Across from her, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz adjusted his tie, his silver hair perfectly in place, papers spread before him like a trial lawyer about to cross-examine a witness. The moderator's voice echoed softly in the pre-show silence. "We're live in 30 seconds. For a brief moment, the two opponents locked eyes. He gave a tight, polite smile, half courtesy, half warning. She didn't return it. Crockett's focus was surgical. The kind of composure that comes not from arrogance, but from preparation so deep that fear becomes irrelevant. The red light blinked on. "Good evening, and welcome to CNN's special coverage of the Voting Rights Protection Act," said anchor Rebecca Mitchell. Joining us tonight are two distinguished voices, Harvard Law Professor Alan Dershowitz and Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "Thank you for having me," Dershowitz began, his tone seasoned with confidence. "I've been teaching constitutional law longer than most members of Congress have been alive. And I must say, this new bill represents one of the most dangerous federal overreaches I've ever seen." The comment wasn't subtle. It was a direct shot across the table. Crockett didn't blink. "Thank you, Rebecca," she said evenly. "And thank you, Professor, for reminding us how long you've been in the game. Tonight, I hope we can discuss not just theory, but reality. The kind of reality that determines whether an American can vote or not." The exchange drew quiet murmurs from the small studio audience. Rebecca leaned in. "Let's begin with the basics. Professor Dershowitz, you've said this bill is unconstitutional. Congresswoman Crockett, you helped draft it. What exactly is at stake here?" Before the question could even finish echoing, Dershowitz leaned forward. "What's at stake," he said, tapping the desk for emphasis, "is the constitutional balance of power. The Congresswoman wants Washington to control how states run their elections. That's not democracy. That's federal coercion." He glanced toward the camera as if addressing the nation directly. "This bill treats states as untrustworthy children who can't manage their own laws. It undermines federalism, one of the pillars of our Constitution." Crockett tilted her head slightly, a calm smile forming. "Professor," she said softly, "with respect, that's an elegant argument, if you ignore the actual text of the Constitution." The audience stirred again. "Article 1, Section 4, she continued, clearly states that Congress may at any time make or alter regulations concerning federal elections. So, unless you've discovered a new amendment I'm unaware of, Congress absolutely has that authority." For the first time, Dershowitz hesitated. His eyes narrowed. "You're oversimplifying. The Supreme Court has repeatedly recognized limits to that authority." "Shelby County versus Holder," Crockett interrupted. "Yes, I'm familiar. I litigated voting rights cases that were gutted because of that ruling. I've seen what happens when states abuse the very autonomy you're defending. Closed polling stations, voter purges, laws so precise in their restrictions that they effectively disenfranchise minorities under the pretense of integrity. That's not federalism. That's manipulation." The silence in the studio was sharp. Dershowitz shifted his papers. "I respect your passion, Congresswoman, but this isn't a courtroom. It's a matter of constitutional interpretation, not anecdotes." Crockett's eyes locked on him. "I know the difference between an anecdote and evidence, Professor. Do you?" A ripple of laughter spread across the audience, quickly smothered by Rebecca's professional composure. "Let's stay on point," she said, glancing between them. "Professor, you've mentioned this bill violates state sovereignty. Congresswoman, your response?" Crockett leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. "We're not overriding state sovereignty. We're ensuring equal access. The Constitution grants states the power to administer elections, yes, but it grants Congress the duty to protect those elections from discrimination. That's what this bill does." She turned toward Dershowitz. The real question, Professor, isn't whether states have authority. It's whether they're using that authority to silence voters. He opened his mouth to counter, but the timing was off. The rhythm of control had shifted. Behind the glass, the control room producers were glued to the monitors. "She's cornering him," one whispered. The social media team began typing captions before the exchange even finished. They could feel it, the viral spark. Back on set, Dershowitz took a measured breath. "Congresswoman, I've spent 50 years defending the Constitution. I've written books on it. I've taught it to generations of lawyers. With all due respect, I think I understand its limits better than a first-term legislator." There it was, the condescension, the trigger. Crockett didn't flinch. "I don't doubt your experience, Professor. But maybe the issue tonight isn't who's read the Constitution the longest. It's who's understood it the most completely." The words landed like a quiet detonation. Rebecca interjected quickly. "Congresswoman, let's explore the legal side of that. Professor Dershowitz has cited Shelby County versus Holder and Crawford versus Marion County as precedent for state control. Do you dispute that framework?" "I don't dispute precedent," Crockett replied. "I dispute selective reading of it. In Crawford, the court upheld voter ID laws only because the evidence of voter burden was limited at the time. If new evidence emerges that shows significant disenfranchisement, that precedent no longer protects those laws. And we have that evidence now. States are using these laws to shape the electorate, not secure it." Dershowitz interjected. "That's conjecture, not law." Crockett smiled faintly. "No, Professor. That's exactly what the Supreme Court said. If the facts change, the law's application changes. You wrote that yourself in your 2005 Harvard Law Review article." He froze. Excuse me?" She reached into her folder and lifted a printed page. "Your words. Quote, judicial interpretation must evolve with empirical evidence, lest constitutional theory become constitutional myth. So tell me, have the facts changed or have your alliances?" For a long, excruciating beat, Dershowitz said nothing. His jaw tightened. Rebecca, sensing the tension cresting, broke in. "We're going to take a quick 5-minute break," she announced with practice calm. "When we return, we'll continue this critical conversation on voting rights and constitutional interpretation." The red recording light blinked off. Dershowitz exhaled, rubbing his temple. Crockett leaned back in her chair, composed, almost serene. In those few seconds of off-air silence, it was clear to everyone in the studio who had just taken control of the night. While the network cuts to commercials, take a moment to support honest debate. If you believe in real, fact-based discussions that the mainstream often avoids, subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps independent journalism alive, and your voice matters here more than ever. When the cameras come back, the gloves come off. The professor's confidence cracks, the congresswoman strikes again, and one question ends the debate entirely. The studio lights flared back on. The red camera light blinked once again. Rebecca Mitchell's voice was calm, but her expression gave away the anticipation everyone felt. Welcome back to CNN's special coverage of the Voting Rights Protection Act debate. We're joined by Professor Alan Dershowitz and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Before the break, we were discussing constitutional authority and voter access. Professor, you wanted to respond. Dershowitz straightened his papers. His smile was tight now, forced. Yes, thank you, Rebecca. I'd simply remind the Congresswoman that legal theory isn't about emotion. It's about structure. Laws like this risk destabilizing the federal balance that's kept this country intact for over 2 centuries. When Congress dictates how states must operate, it undermines democracy rather than protecting it. Crockett's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. Professor, with respect, what undermines democracy is pretending that discrimination is a matter of balance. Dershowitz shook his head. That's a political talking point, not legal reasoning. She leaned forward. Then let's talk law. You've invoked federalism as if it were absolute. But the same Constitution you quote also grants Congress explicit enforcement power through the 14th and 15th Amendments. Those amendments were written precisely because states couldn't be trusted to protect citizens equally. He raised a hand. And yet those powers were never meant to override the basic autonomy of. Crockett cut in, sharp and surgical. Autonomy to discriminate? The question hung in the air like a verdict. Even the control room went silent. "Excuse me," Dershowitz said, his voice suddenly softer. "You talk about balance," Crockett continued, "but balance between what exactly? Between equality and exclusion? Between freedom and suppression? Because when you strip voting access from certain Americans, that's not balance, that's regression." He exhaled, visibly irritated. "Congresswoman, you're mischaracterizing my argument. I'm not defending discrimination. I'm defending constitutional limits." "Then let's test that," she said calmly, flipping through her notes. "In 1991, you testified before the House Judiciary Committee. You said, and I quote, 'Congress must act where states have demonstrated repeated failures in protecting voting access. Federal standards are not an intrusion, but a safeguard.' Do you still believe that?" He blinked. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I'd have to review the context of that statement," he said finally. "The context," Crockett replied, her tone now almost gentle, "is that you were right 30 years ago. What changed, Professor?" The question was devastating in its simplicity. There it was, the powerful question. No shouting, no spectacle, just precision. The audience felt it immediately. You could hear the air conditioning hum in the silence that followed. Rebecca Mitchell glanced between them, unsure whether to step in. "Congresswoman, would you like to expand on that?" "I think the record speaks for itself," Crockett said softly. "The Constitution hasn't changed. The court's interpretation hasn't changed in its core principles. The only thing that's changed," she looked directly into the camera, "is which side of history some people have chosen to stand on." The studio remained utterly still. Dershowitz looked down at his notes, shuffling them though he clearly wasn't reading. He cleared his throat. "I believe the Congresswoman is engaging in personal attack rather than legal discourse." "No, Professor," she said, her tone steady. "It's not personal. It's constitutional. You once believed Congress had the responsibility to protect voters. You've only shifted that belief because the political winds changed. But the Constitution doesn't bend to convenience." Rebecca finally stepped in. "Let's take a quick moment here. Professor, do you wish to clarify your position?" Dershowitz adjusted his glasses, his voice quiet now. "I continue to believe in protecting voting rights within the framework of federalism. If my previous testimony has been interpreted differently, then perhaps that's something worth revisiting." Crockett nodded, gracious but firm. "I appreciate that, Professor. Revisiting our principles is how democracy survives." The segment ended with Rebecca thanking both guests. The studio lights dimmed. The audience clapped politely, though the energy in the room made it obvious who had owned the night. But the real story began after the broadcast. Within an hour, clips of the debate flooded social media. The moment Crockett asked, "What changed, Professor?" it exploded. Viewers called it the cleanest dismantling of arrogance ever aired on CNN. Within 3 hours, the clip passed 1 million views across multiple platforms. Political commentators couldn't stop replaying it. Conservative analysts admitted Dershowitz looked unprepared. Progressive hosts called it the moment old legal authority met new moral clarity. Even Harvard law students, his own legacy, started dissecting the debate online, line by line. The next morning, Dershowitz issued a short statement. "Congresswoman Crockett's passion and preparation are commendable. Our democracy benefits from vigorous debate. I stand by my constitutional interpretation, but respect the Congresswoman's perspective." It read like an apology without saying the word. Meanwhile, Crockett's office received thousands of messages. Law students, voters, teachers, even former colleagues of Dershowitz wrote to her privately, calling the debate a generational handoff. By week's end, CNN had replayed the full segment twice. Their analyst described it as the debate that redefined expertise in public law. For Crockett, the win wasn't about humiliation. It was about exposure. She didn't just silence a critic. She exposed how long the Constitution had been used as a shield for stagnation. Her question, "What change, Professor?" wasn't about him at all. It was about America. When principle becomes flexible, power wins. When conviction stays constant, truth does. If you believe debates like this matter, where preparation defeats posturing, where evidence trumps ego, subscribe to this channel. We'll keep bringing you stories the mainstream filters out. Because somewhere between reputation and reason, the truth still lives.